Toni Reavis, longtime running analyst and friend. It's been a very long time. You just got back from the Boston Marathon, the 125th running. And boy, it must have been odd being there in the fall rather than the spring, huh?
Yeah, the strangest thing, Bob, nice to be with you, was all the leaves on the trees. We're used to having bare branches, but blooming azaleas on Com Ave and Newbury Street. And instead, we've got the smells of spring were gone, but the leaves of the summer and the fall were there. The leaves hadn't really turned their autumnal colors quite yet, but just the fact that the trees were full of leaves was very interesting.
Yeah, Boston is such a hallowed ground. I had referred to that so many times, but it truly is. I mean, you've been covering marathons for so many years, New York City, Los Angeles, and now I've learned 44 years at Boston. What is it that's so special about that race? What is the feeling about it that makes people so enamored to it, so wanting to participate and even win in that race?
Well, Bob, I think it is the word history. The history of the Boston Marathon is the history of the sport, both foot racing and wheelchair racing. You have to go back and look that historically, the inaugural Olympic Games of 1896 in Athens, 2/3 of the team was put together by the Boston Athletic Association. And on the boat ride back from Greece to the United States, the members of the BAA were saying, boy, that marathon thing they had in Athens, which was the first time they had a marathon, an Olympic competitive marathon, won by Spiridon Lewis, a Greek farmer, essentially, and the 60,000 people in the King in the stadium. And people said, my God, that was a great thing, was it? Let's do one back home. And the next spring of 1897 was the inaugural Boston Marathon. So that's how closely tied the Boston Marathon is with the entire history of the sport. And then, of course, in 1975, with Bob Hall running the first wheelchair competitively, and Will Cloney, the race director, saying, if you break 3 hours, I'll give you a finisher certificate. And Bob wheeled a 2:58 in an Everson Jennings hospital chair, which weighed about 40 pounds, I'm sure. And you can imagine with the sleek wheelchairs they have in competition today, imagine being in one of those hospital chairs back in those days and trying to run on that course. So you can't give enough credit to Bob Hall for what he did. It sort of kick-started wheelchair racing in Boston. And Boston has always been like hell ground for runners and for wheelchair racers. And, even when you're training on the course or visiting the course, the ghosts of so many thousands of heartbeats have been measured along that route, that just being out on that course, even not in competition, makes you realize that a lot of special things have happened here, and you feel it.
Toni, although you are a specialist in running, there's probably no more qualified, able-bodied person to talk on disabled sports. You've been there with me from the beginning. You probably even covered a little bit of it before you were involved with me. So we saw a pretty unique situation there this past Monday with Marcel Hoog. He's coming off of a stellar performance in the Paralympics. He took second the day before in the Chicago Marathon, and here he comes into Boston. Not exactly favorable conditions for a point-to-point course, but nonetheless, halfway through, he was on target to maybe set a record.
No, we had the Spotters Network in our CBS local television coverage. So we knew every mile where both Manuela Schär for the women and Marcel was for the men, and the margins. I mean, I'm just looking at my split notes, which are right here on my desk in front of me. He was on 69:06 pace at 8 miles because that's all the downhill early miles. Mm-hmm. So hills at 17 miles yet. He had a 1:40 lead at 7 miles. So he had already destroyed the competition. And as we saw the day before, you put him on a flat course with no hills, and 4 guys together with Aaron Pike and Daniel Romanchuk, they can't get away from one another because there's no hills to work one another over. And as long as you're in that slipstream, you're just taking advantage. And so they shared a thing. And when there's one hill on the course, Romanchuk took advantage of it with about 400 meters to go and won the race. But in Boston, you got those downhills. And for years and years and years, we saw Ernst Van Dyke win his 10 titles by taking off right from the gun. And back in the controlled start day, they had to wait for a kilometer before they could really attack. But once, I think it's the third or fourth year now, they've eliminated that controlled rolling start. And so if you got the intention and you got the will and you want to go, and you knew Marcel did, off you go. And if they can't stick with you, by the time they reach the hills at 17 miles, it's just too darn late.
Exactly. So on to what I consider to be a mild controversy, this being Marcel Hug. He finally sees, as he's coming down through the brownstones, he's back on target. He's got a shot to break his record. And, you know, this comes with a substantial payday. And
for the first time.
And he overshoots and follows the camera truck right through into basically oblivion, has to stop his chair, turn around, and go back up to Boylston. And the controversy becomes, this has happened 3 times now. It happened to Tom Sellers in 1994, chasing down Heinz Fry. It happened again in the early 2000s to Krieger Shabor, and he ended up losing a position. And then it happens again just on Monday. So how do you explain to people on a course with 3 turns that they could possibly miss this turn? These are all very cerebral men.
No, but I don't know the exact percentage, but the amount of blood that the brain requires. The body's interesting. It shunts blood where it's required most. And when you get in everyday thinking or in class or in school or you're working, a lot of blood in the brain. When you decide to go exercise and exercise very hard, the working muscles, the blood shunted there. So in foot racing, it's in your legs. In wheelchair racing, it's in your back and your shoulders, your arms. It's not in your head. And I've always said, we've all looked at split times when we're racing hard, and you look at your watch and you see those numbers. I know what every one of those numbers is, but I just can't quite compute what it means. Because when you need your wits most about you, you have fewer of your wits at your disposal because you're all in. And that's what Marcel was saying, is that he was right on the knife's edge. In other words, I see my splits at 22 miles, he was at 1:18 flat pace. In other words, his record's 1:18.04 from 2017, the same year that Marcella ran 1:28.17 for the women's record, when it was just ideal weather conditions for the chairs. Well, so he was right at 22 miles, he's right on it. At 23 miles, he was on 1:08. It was on 1:18.44 pace. So he'd slipped to being from just right on it to just over it. So he's fluctuating back and forth, but there's $50,000 in the balance, right? Yeah. So I think being a 4-time previous champion, he was pretty certain, give or take, what the splits were, what it sort of meant. He knew he was close, right? So he just put his head down and just went. Well, the bottom line is when the lead car has been correct for 24 and a half miles, and you just got your head down and you're just hammering for all you've got, you're just not thinking much beyond the moment at hand. There is no horizon. There's not even like 50 meters ahead. You're just going, you're in your moment, you're internal monitoring, and you're going all out, and you're seeing the shape in front of you that you've just been following for mile after mile. And so it just makes sense. You just keep following it until somebody says, hey, buddy, don't follow that guy. In 1994, at the New York City Marathon, in the foot race, 2 Mexicans, Benjamin Paredes and Herman Silva, together, going up Central Park South, heading toward Columbus Circle. Well, the lead motorcycle couldn't get over the curb, and so it had to peel off early. Well, when it peeled off early on Central Park South, Herman Silva said the same thing to Marcel Hug did. This guy's been right for 24 and a half miles. So when it peeled off, he peeled off with it. And Benjamin Paredes kept going straight. Fortunately, there was a cop and just yelled at him, hey. He turned around, now adrenalized out of his mind, caught Benjamin Paredes and won the race. But it was a very famous incident at the New York City Marathon where the guy went off course because you're so all in the moment. Something that seems obvious on the side of the road as you're watching is not quite so obvious when you're in the cauldron of competition.
As I watched the finish and Marcel came through, the celebration seemed kind of meager. You know, usually after coming to the line like that, you're winning the Boston Marathon again. I mean, a phenomenal time. And he just seemed sort of not even underwhelmed, heartbroken.
Oh, you wish there wouldn't have been a bonus. I mean, there was $50,000. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was just a course record, great. Love to have the course record. I mean, it's his own course record. But the fact that you're missing $50,000 in the world of wheelchair racing, there's not a lot of $50,000 paydays out there. And so
no, there are not. And you know, Tony, I'd like to thank you for joining us. You got to say, if you could wrap it up in one thing, you got to say Marcel Hug took it like a man, and he never blamed anybody but himself. But I'm sure it still hurts today.
Well, he's got 188 days from last Monday to get himself in shape and hope that they have a traditional westerly tail breeze and warmer weather from a wheelchair standpoint. And if he does that, he knows he's got the chair to get it done, because the chair and his fitness and his age and his experience all lead you to believe that he can break 118 on that course.
Undoubtedly. Thank you, Toni Reavis.
Great seeing you, Bob.